So thank you very much, Mr. Ellison, for having us today. So the objective today is to introduce the audience to private aged care. It's a term that we as a media group have been using for 5 or 6 years because of the growth of LBK and Odyssey, and what we see as a media group travelling around the countryside, green shoots of an alternative model to the traditional retirement village sector. And if you've been to any of our leaders' summits or reading our publications, you will have noticed that we are promoting heavily that there is a definite shift amongst the consumers about what they are seeking in retirement villages, and at a time that the not-for-profits over the last 4 or 5 years have been segueing away from residential aged care development and saying that assisted living in a retirement village sector is a far more attractive business model because it's less regulated and the customer is paying for the accommodation component, and we can provide our home care services into it. And we as a media group have been saying that's fabulous, but in reality we think that that strategy is flawed. Now, who are we to be making these statements? Because we are a media group. I'd just like to explain that we have an editorial team of 5. So myself, rather grandiosely, I'm not a journalist, but we have 3 journalists, and we have my colleague James Wiltshire down the front. The 5 of us meet every morning, 5 days a week, from 8:30 to 9, religiously, to discuss what is happening in the sector. So that is 3 journalists are speaking to CEOs and C-suite executives every day, and politicians. And James and I get around and speak to quite a few people as well. And so we're constantly discussing who's doing what are the major movements, what's the thinking of these people, and so on. And that does give us this perhaps very special observation of the marketplace. Now, if we look at the retirement village sector, we say, will retirement villages transform into a private aged care? And we say it will for one very good reason, and that is that the customer will be the one that decides what the services are that we are offering as a sector. It will not be the operator. So operators at board levels can make all the decisions they like about what they're going to offer and services, but the reality is that the customer, to our experience, is going to decide. Now, to give you an idea of the strength of the customer, but also why we have this challenge, this is Laurie Suchich, who we interviewed. She is a resident in a retirement village, Australian Unity Retirement Village here in Sydney. When we interviewed her, until 1 month beforehand, she had not been out of her apartment for 3 years. And the operator did not know that she had been in her apartment for 3 years. And she was the sole carer for her husband. She's 91, her husband is 93. He has Parkinson's, and she has been looking after her husband. She hasn't left because she was fearful of a fall. They have been together sharing one $8 meal a day for the last 2 years. She said, I'm staying in this unit because it's safe, and she's typical of the customer that we're seeing more and more of, who is saying, you will not get me out of this apartment. I'm looking after my husband. I'm not going into residential aged care, even though I'm basically immobile. Now, we have a tidal wave of people like Laurie coming through the system, and everybody in this room is aware of it. Regis released their investor pack last week along with their annual results, and they had in it this graph of the people turning 85. Now, I know we've all seen these. We have put in this red line. So what it's saying is that in 2025, where the red line touches this bar here, it says, to our mind, that is the number of aged care beds we've got in Australia today. It's the number of hospital beds we've got in Australia today. It's the home care workforce we've got in Australia today. They're the people turning 85. We know that the average person going into home care is 82, average person going into residential care is 84. So look at the number of people who are turning 85 in the years ahead. And then if I add another line in there, which is what's happening in 2030, and you can see that this bar this one here, is saying that if we've got 600,000 people aged 85 now, we're going to have nearly 800,000 people aged 85 in just 5 years' time. And that means that we're going to have 200,000 more people, 85 plus, or 33% more than we have today. So if we have 33% more people, but all of our beds and services are full, what's going to happen to those people? Regis also pointed out the number of beds that are coming online. So you can see here, between FY21 and FY24, 6,500 beds have come online. The financial report for Australia in 2022-23 said we need 9,300 a year to satisfy that number of people. So you can see that there's a significant number of people coming through. We all know this, but nobody is facing up to what was going to happen to them. Now, if you've been to our Leaders Summit, you would have met Cyril, who is Cyril Toos, who's 86 in hospital in Victoria Harbour, which is the retirement mecca of South Australia, in October 2024, and he was on page 9 of The Australian. Now, as a media group, we take in all medias, and we've seen that every day, there is another news report with somebody in a home care crisis, and obviously we had the pressure taking place in Parliament just over the last few days on this. Now, for dear old Cyril, I'll just read this out to you. He said that in October, in January, so this is October, in January, Mr. Toos was approved for a level 4 home care package, the highest care available. But due to the backlog of demand, lack of funding and staffing shortfalls, no care was provided. This is in Victor Harbour, where huge population. Since then, his health has deteriorated so badly, Mr. Toos, who stands 183 centimetres or 6 foot, now weighs 42 kilos. So Mr. Toos has a bruise on his face, he's had a fall, he's 42 kilos, he's not eating, obviously, he's most probably not hydrating as well. And Mr. Toos told The Australian he had now made the decision to die and had started the euthanasia process through VAD. This is no life, there is no dignity. And in January, about January 12, he did take his life through VAD. So that's the situation we are facing across Australia. And if I go back to Laurie, she's looking at the same situation for she and her husband. So we, as GCM, have this hypothesis, and this is that retirement villages are the only solution. They're age-friendly, age-appropriate accommodation. And they have less regulation, so everybody is desirous of providing seniors accommodation under that less regulation. But the problem is, the residents are also understanding, or future residents are understanding this, and they're saying, we're going to grab this retirement village accommodation, we're going to get home care up to a high level, and then we're going to refuse to leave. And our hypothesis is that within 5 to 7 years, 100,000 of the 200,000 beds in retirement villages are going to be aged care beds. Just think about that. 100,000 of the 200,000 beds in retirement villages are going to be aged care beds. That means 50% of the retirement village sector is really going to be residential aged care. And what does that do to the business model? And that's what we're going to talk about with private aged care. In the 5 years that we've been discussing this, people who are at the coalface are coming to the same conclusion. So most people would know Grant Porteroy, senior partner of Stuart Brown. I asked him a question in our offices to Vio. What does he think the role of private aged care will be? And this is what he had to say.
It's going to be an important growth area, and it's going to change the way that the retirement sector now focuses. They'll be focusing on aged care delivery. They'll be focusing on building retirement villages that have got the building certification, we call it 9C, to allow for residential aged care or assisted living. And I think that this is going to be a significant change in the sector, and I think private aged care is the one that's going to drive it. I think obviously you want to have innovation, you want to have different models to meet it, so one size won't fit all. I think the DMF model is running out of steam, as it were, because it is getting paid at the end, and also sometimes you're not getting a DMF while the resident is already still there. I think that the upfront models is more of an attraction, but also provides more certainty to the resident coming in, that they know what they're getting and how much it's going to cost them on a recurrent basis. And I think that from a planning point of view, I think that provides much certainty for their financial position. You've got to remember that a large percentage of the boomers coming forward, there's still going to be those with, who don't have financial sustainability, but a large sector have now got inbuilt wealth through their home. I call it non-personal exertion wealth. And they have to be using that home as supplementing and part of the user pay system. And that means that if they sell the home to go into a retirement living, some of it will be an entry contribution, some of it will be the earnings of that, be it super or the home, to pay for their recurrent costs. I think Courage is that aged care operators for a while have been dependent on policy. There's been a number of policy changes and a number of reforms, and they've been basically waiting for those reforms to come through, assessing how they come. Reform's always a slow progress. I think we're at a stage now where the operators almost have to take into their own hands and be innovative and have courage to try new lines of care service delivery, new lines of accommodation, look at service, retirement living and assisted living. So they've got to have courage to not only invest, but they've got courage to change their business model to adopt a much more expansive approach to care delivery.
So what Grant is saying is that courage, that's his new theme going forward, that operators are going to need courage to perhaps move away from the traditional business models, and as he mentioned there several times, rearranging your cash flow from not from a DMF at the end of the time that a resident is with you to up the front. And what Byron will be explaining with the LDK membership model, that allows that to take place. Now, the process for today is that I'm going to invite James Wiltshire to come up in a moment and just take a quick tour around the country to show that there are green shoots of new models appearing, particularly around care suites. Then I've got one or two other videos, and then we're going to have a conversation with Byron Cannon, the CEO of LDK. Then we're going to look at the tech side of how can villages be adapting tech to support this new cohort coming into villages, because it's a very different business model. And then what tech can be available in the home. And then we're going to have a panel session where you can ask all the people who have got this experience any questions you like. So I'd like to now ask James to come and take us through the countryside.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thanks for joining us all this morning in this great office. What we were going to do is do a quick run through of what we see as we get around the country. So I have the great pleasure of saying I actually walked into my first retirement village about 25 years ago. And a good friend of mine remembered it, but after I said this on Tuesday, he said, "You're also 25 kilos lighter when you walked into your first retirement village." So ageing gets us all at the end of the day. What we want to do is just have a quick look around the country and see what others are doing, because yes, we're talking about private aged care today, but I think there's been a real merge of the accommodation and care around the country. There's some really good models to be looked at, some really good developments to be looked at. But for those of you that have established village, I think there's a lot of takeaways that you can also take back to your established communities as well. The first that we wanted to highlight is some of the work that Retire Australia is doing. So they're very much, as a private operator, going all in on the care space. They've led the way with going back into assisted living. And the first one of their developments that they've really brought online is actually not too far on the Central Coast at Glengara, where they've built what they're calling a new version of assisted living model. But what they've done really well, for those of you who have been around and have seen assisted living, while they're smaller units compared to independent living, they're priced accordingly. It's always the cost of living that turns out to be the barrier. So if you've ever tried selling serviced apartments, you know that you're often selling a product that might cost $2,000 to $2,500 a month to live there to get your services and your care. And what Retire Australia has done is they've actually set up a care account that residents can enter into when they go into the village. That effectively becomes the care safety net that the resident can draw down on as the time comes for them to receive care and support services. So they're not just looking at the built form and the offering and where they sit by way of providing a purpose-built accommodation for someone with immediate care needs. They're also looking at how they can create safety nets in and around the financial questions that we often go through with the customer when it comes time to buying a care-based product. At their village up in Burleigh, the Verge, they've taken it one step further now with the introduction of care suites. So very similar to the care suites we see in New Zealand. And these are a small number of aged care homes, so 10 care suites they've got in this community. They are designed and built to 9C, so that means they can provide everything from ceiling hoists and the like to support the person as they age, all the way through to doing bariatric care through the system. They have 24-hour staffing there, and those 10 care suites were set up alongside a village of 150 ILUs. And the intent when they did this was to create a care pathway for their residents into the care suites. And there's no DMF on these care suites. So they're allowing a very easy financial model to transition across, and the resident having to fund their daily services and about $300 a day to live there. What's very interesting was this was designed to complement the independent living units. And what they tell us when we go and talk to Brett and Paul and the like, is that they're actually catering to the wider community that are stuck in their home needing care and support or even rehabilitation care, that are seeing this as a pathway for them to go down. So their vision was it would help their residents, and the actual fact is there are so many residents in the wider community waiting for aged care beds, so this has become a very good alternative for them to aged care in the Gold Coast community where they're located. If we look a little bit more closer to home up at Willoughby, you've got Highgrove's development there, and what they're doing is a similar, where they've got independent living alongside care suites or private aged care. Their development is a slightly different mix with 111 independent living units and 46 care suites. They're opening this month and they have 160 residents set to move in this month. So anyone who's opened a village or commissioned a village, moving in villages is a fair task. So to do 160 in a month is an amazing effort for the team there. And what they will tell you is the fact that they've matched the independent living with the care has really made their product shine in the Willoughby area, because people can move in knowing, yes, they can live independently, but through their Highgrove care model, high care as they call it, they're able to get the care and support either in the care suites or in the independent living unit. So they're blending those models together very successfully. If we look a bit more widely and we go all the way to the west, I think this is probably one of the best developments I've walked through in my time in the sector. It's a stunning development over in Perth, Grant and Applecross. And it's the vision of that man there, John Frame, who was the former CFO of Bethany Group. And what John wanted to do was to create a housing product, a retirement village product that had no DMF, but was self-sustaining, in that the residents funded everything and the operator was really there as a service provider. They launched that development about 2 years ago, very successfully, where they've got the entire building is built to 9C. So think of that. This is a high-rise building built to 9C, so ageing in pace as possible in the unit. And the way that they've handed everything over to the residents with the service provider is through setting this up as a strata development, a strata scheme. I've managed strata schemes for 20 years, and I was really curious to see how this is working. They've put all the protections in place to protect the strata side of the development, and all the residents know what they're buying in for. And with no DMF, there's one resident there who spent $3 million on a unit, and when Chris and I met with him in November last year, he had it revalued at about $4.5 million in less than 6 months.
Wow.
That's purely based on the demand for the product. They built 10 care suites, similar to what Retire Australia did, and they're being operated by Roshana Care. So Roshana Care has gone in as the aged care provider for those 10 care suites. The demand for the care suites has been so strong that Roshana Care then spoke to the developer and has purchased the 10 one-bedroom units in that development so they can have 20 care suites salt and pepper throughout the development a little bit more widely. So they see that as being their model with great success, and the rumour is they'll be looking at doing another development shortly based on the success of this one. So an excellent model. If you get a chance to go over to Perth, I highly recommend you reach out to John and take a look. He's more than happy to show it around. So what are then some of the considerations we need to be thinking of when we look at more traditional builds, the broad acre builds? Some of you might have seen this slide before, but when you look at the traditional build, the broadacre build, where you have residents spread out, your great challenge is where are your staff located, isn't it? These beautiful new toys, medium density, everyone's contained in a building with everything accessible by the lift. So how do we take the learnings from these products and what are some of the considerations we need to have in our world today, given not every village is upfront? And when you look at it, we realise the staff are located in a central area and you could have 300, 400, 500 metres from that single building to the resident on the edge of the village. So what are some of the things we need to be talking about today if we accept that in 3 to 5 years' time, half of all our residents are going to be needing care and support? What are the things we need to be talking about at a strategic level and an executive level? And how do we solve for that problem? And what we see, what we talk about, is the way that we need to be solving for that problem is looking at technology solutions, which are going to help us with staffing, line of sight, and providing care and support for residents. But more importantly, for some of it's going to be, how do we partner with the right providers to deliver that care and support? We're not all home care providers, we're not all aged care providers. So it's going to be a combination of how well we use technology. We've got David Wally who can talk about that a little bit later, and how we use right care partnerships with right systems in place to support the governance of that. And Caroline Lee will share a little bit about that a little bit later this morning. And the reason we say we need to be getting our head around it is because as we travel around the country, we're talking to more than 650 village managers through our professional development program. The number one question we always get asked about is what is our duty of care to support residents as they age in our communities? That's the number one question we get asked from your staff day in, day out. And even when we're not in a room like this, we're getting emails coming through for us about what do we do, what do we do? And the landscape is changing when it comes to care and support. Is everyone familiar with the Victorian legislation? They introduced a new piece of legislation in May that had a new clause in it. I know you can't read that, but here's the takeaway. In Victoria, you can now not terminate a resident's contract in a retirement village for care needs if their care needs can be met by a home care package. Now think about that. If you have an ageing resident in a village in Victoria and you think that they can't live safely, but they can be getting a home care package, you now can't terminate for health reasons. When the home care packages finally come in under the new system, home care packages will go all the way through to palliation, won't they? Consider that. Our world is changing, which is why what we talk about in this room today with you all is the DMF model has a place alongside private aged care, but you can play with levers, and we'll talk about that a little bit more with Byron. The horizontal model is inefficient, which is why our challenge is how do we look at technology and how do we look at smart partnerships to be able to deliver services to residents to keep them in their homes safely. But more importantly, the D-Day decision for everyone in this room is, are we delivering care or are we facilitating care? And hopefully over the course of the morning, it'll help you solidify how you have those conversations at your own boardroom. So I'm going to hand over to Chris, who will continue the presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, James. So one aspect that James hasn't mentioned, which I'd like to draw everybody's attention to, we haven't mentioned the word dementia. And so with more than 50% of residents in the private aged care models that you're going to see having dementia, it is a major factor. And I see in the audience we have the people from Visionaries, Old Group Homes Australia here, and if you want to get a true understanding of how you can bring dementia care into your village, I suggest you speak to Tamara and her friends in the audience today. I'm just going to go through a couple of a video with Cam Ansell, a brief one, and he's going to show you this slide, which was his penultimate slide at the Leaders Summit. And what this is a slide that Ansell Strategic says is going to be the growth areas in the retirement and aged care sectors over the next 30 years. And he's going to say that this green section is assisted living over these. And so I'm just like to, showing you this because when you watch the video, keep this in mind. So Ansell Strategic have done an analysis of where they see the growth coming from, and they provided this chart. And between 2025 and 2030, this is what he says is assisted living. This is what he says is private aged care. But between 25 and 30, you'll see that, again, they also see that 200,000 people are going into assisted living or private aged care over the next 5 years. So this is Cam Ansell.
And they give way to the baby boomer generation, which are the architects of consumer choice, and they are not grateful. And neither are we later, the Generation X either. As the architects of consumer choice, they want to exercise their ability to be able to live in environments which is as much as they have grown up in the future. And they're less likely to be drawn to be going into villages of older people. And so the likelihood of me wanting to go into as a pull factor to hang out with a whole bunch of older people when I'm pretending not to be old myself is less. And so it's more likely to give way to push factors. And those push factors are health. And I know that this offends some people within the retirement living sector, but I think that there is still growth within the retirement living sector, but I do not think that those that provide only accommodation options are going to go in line with the growth in the number of older people coming through the system. In fact, from about 2033, our modelling indicates that it's more likely that the numbers are likely to decrease, and the ability to be able to get DMF entry contributions for people is going to lessen, and this is what we think it looks like. This maps out using all of those different metrics where we think the volume of demand will be moving forward. And I think because we no longer will have to rely so heavily on government or government funding, that our ability to respond to that demand is going to be much, much better. Across the top line, you have residential aged care. As I said, it does increase, but it doesn't get to 400,000 in 10 years. It increases relatively marginally. Most of the nursing homes I walk into every year in this country are not fit for people with high levels of functional dependence. Most of our investment in residential aged care won't be in new ones. It will be on rebuilding the ones that we've got and making them better for people at high acuity. The one below that one is private aged care. Those people that will fund their way out of residential aged care services when otherwise they really would have needed it. The one below that then, that massive area of growth in green there, is assisted living, being made up of care homes specifically made for older people and retirement villages that deliver homes. And you can see at the bottom there, independent living, those villages that do nothing but provide accommodation solutions, decrease in size and increase in the volume of people that are in there because they have limited choice. That projection indicates that the biggest area of growth and the biggest area of service delivery is really operating on the fringes at the moment. And some of the stuff that you're going to hear about today, groups from Black Odyssey and LDK are going to be talking, they have been innovating and leading the charge. They'll become mainstream in the future. And for us to be able to think about where we want to be in the future is most exciting. The last 10 years, the last year since the session in March last year, I've done more strategy work with organisations, including a number of you here today, than I'd done in the 30 years before that. We've been really constrained, as Tom said earlier, in our ability to be able to innovate, and we continue to be while we're hamstrung by all of the requirements, and we're addicted to government funding to be able to deliver services. But as that starts to change and we're paying more for stuff ourselves, I think that naturally gives way. Our biggest challenge is not trying to get across all of the compliance. It's trying to let go of it. It's trying to think what our consumers in the future would want in that future and how we can deliver against it.
So you can see that Cam is marching to the same tune as we, and for those of you who are not familiar with Cam, Ansell Strategic Group is perhaps the major advisor at board levels across the country for particularly not-for-profits, along with Stuart Brown. But as I mentioned before, if we look at this graph, 200,000 people are going to be in a retirement village in one form or another, according to Ansell Strategic, within 5 years. And that's really sobering, isn't it? I'd like to now bring to life what is the model of private aged care and how fast are the consumers seeking it. So I'm just going to give you a quick edit of the presentation done by Aaron Lavelle, the CEO of Odyssey. The first section is he's just explaining their growth in 5 years. So if in this room thinking, yeah, but it's how can we possibly grow? I can do one at a time. This private group on the Gold Coast, first property on the ground, stage one opening 5 years ago. Now they've got 840 in development and $400 million from just one private developer. This is what Aaron has to say.
In terms of vision, on day one when we opened our doors 5 years ago, we really had a vision of owning the Gold Coast when it came to quality care in that over 85 market. We monitor it every quarter. We have quite a complex three-way financial model that attaches to our strategic plan. So I'll just run you through reasonably quickly the sites that we have. So we have 4 sites at different stages of development and planning. When we're completed, it'll be circa 840, maybe 850 homes. We have got a foot on 2 more sites, but certainly no rush to do those. So with Robina, that was our first one. We opened that in August 2020. So just a couple of images to give you a feel for it. We have really nice dining facilities. It's a big part of the formula. We presently sit about 120, and with the 4th tower coming on, we're closing part of our alfresco area to get another 60. We were envisaging 2 shifts, but the residents said, no, it's our home. We want to come down when we want to give residents what they want. So the last one here for Robina is our dementia. We call it memory lane, as I said before. So Chevron Island is our first foray into a high-rise. When you look at the design, it's very much a statement piece. Probably the thing of note here is the top 3 floors we haven't done before. They're really high-end. So there's 3 bedrooms, they're about 226 metres each, 3 mini penthouses, and 3 maxi penthouses. So they're 512 metres with rooftop terrace on. So just to give you a bit of idea on some of the renders, this is the foyer, so very much like a 5-star hotel, salon, coffee shop. This is the dining facility. So I said that's a big part of what we do. It's part of the secret sauce, I guess, in the formula. So Hope Island is our 3rd one. So just looking at the renders here, I heard those giggles. So it's 2 16-storey towers. So this one will have 233 apartments, 200 what we call Odyssey homes, 23 with the dementia, and 10 on the top 2 floors for the penthouses. So our last one, which we only settled 3 and a bit weeks ago, is at Burleigh Waters. So this one here is a really nice piece of land. I don't have any renders yet because it's brand new.
Okay, so you can see from a standing start, they've got 840 homes in their pipeline, $400 million. Phil Usher, the guy who started Odyssey, was able to get the funding behind him, and it's actually Sun Super. No, they've changed their name, haven't they? Sun Super to, can't remember. So Superannuation Fund is funding all of this development for Odyssey. Now, what is the business model? Again, Aaron is just going to talk through the very basic components of the business model, and it's worth hearing before we speak to Bo and Kevin.
There's no doubt care is the glue that keeps them together and what differentiates us from your traditional retirement village. So the comparison to aged care often comes up. The easiest way to explain it is that subject to the capacity and willingness to pay of our residents, we can deliver similar levels of care to an aged care facility. We have a high tide mark on aggressive behaviours. Now, high tide mark would be below a traditional rack that's better suited. And that's really about the enjoyment of the wider facility. And that is probably the greatest area that I come across. Those who do get care from us, about half are funded via home care packages, half are private. In terms of acuity, looking at the current home care packages, 47% are level 4, 31% are level 3. We've only got 1 resident at the moment on level 1. With our staff, we do care at cost. So we regularly compare that to the larger not-for-profits. In all cases, we do that at a cheaper rate. We actually make our money on the development side and through the exit fee structure. If you look at the people who are on the home care packages, 45% of them have the dementia supplement. So we have quite a high proportion of our residents with the onset of dementia. The last key piece of the care is that we have an on-site doctor. We have allied as well, being podiatrists and physios on-site as well.
So you can hear from that quick explanation of the business model. They do care at cost, they do meals at cost. It is all the profit, all of the cash that pays for that private aged care model comes out of property, and the increased value, the capital growth out of demand by the customers for to get access to living in an Odyssey home. And Aaron explained to us in Brisbane that the median point, you call it, midpoint for the age of people in Odyssey is 1.9 months. 1.9 years, apologies. So it really is far shorter than you would expect. Traditionally, it would be 4 years, wouldn't it, Byron?
We're in the higher care levels, probably 3.
3 years in the higher care level. So it's a challenging business model from a cost control, which means that your systems have to be really good, and with the volume of staff that you have. So at Robina, they have 200 residents, they have 75 staff. They have 7 nurses, registered nurses, permanently on staff.